And now it is time for another exciting installment of Prescott, the Extra-Planar Pinkerton Agent, starring Prescott, the Extra-Planar Pinkerton Agent.
How's it going, everybody? This is Prescott, the Extra-Planar Pinkerton Agent. I was calling to let y'all know that, well, I've got a number of fun and wondrous stories to tell, so I might as well just let y'all hear them from beginning to end. I've decided to pull out one of the stories from my vault here that happened in 1892. I was a young spry agent at the time, still a little fresh, but knew enough to be able to handle myself and exactly how to take care of myself. I was called into the small town of Hardy Crab, Louisiana, under the investigation of thefts of government property as well as the disappearance of law-abiding citizens and taxpayers. Well, now, I have never heard of this town before, but I figured, you know what, Louisiana's supposed to be an interesting place, so maybe it'll turn out to be a lot of fun. Well, as it turns out, you can't just go to Hardy Crab. First, you got to go outside to this very, very small station where you can hitch up your horse and so on. And to get to actual Hardy Crab, though, you had to cross some really, really difficult terrain. Now, folks, I didn't necessarily have a problem doing it, but when you get in there to hitch your horse, there's this sweet old lady who says, well, there's an easy way to get there. If you take our newfangled motorized cart, it'll take you over there as though you're floating on air. And of course, she was so sweet, and you could tell that I'm one of those people that likes to support small businesses. So I decided to go ahead and just throw caution to the wind and take advantage of it. So I paid them exactly $1 and got on the motorized cart. I have to say it was quite a smooth ride, but I would have preferred to just stay on my little horse. But, oh well. Carpe diem in Rome, as they say. The most of the time I was there with this man by the name of Sloane. Sloane was a very dour individual who always wore black. Even though it was the summertime and it was hot, and there was no reason to wear black that much anyway, he felt comfortable, I suppose. That was his style. Everybody's got their own style. Well, he didn't really want to talk to me. I asked him how he was. I was telling him about myself. He didn't say nothing. He was just, okay. So anyway, the point is, I just said whatever. Maybe he's just one of those antisocial types. You know, some people are the strong, quiet type, and some are not. I took this little motorized cart to Hardy Crab, and I entered when it was a beautiful afternoon. Quite cool because of the coast, but still a little muggy. And I wasn't necessarily used to the Louisiana lifestyle. But that's what it is, I suppose, being a government agent, doing things in places that you just aren't expecting. Well, when I got to Hardy Crab, the first place I looked was the Tavern and Inn. It was run by a man by the name of Mr. Gunther Maroon. Mr. Gunther Maroon was actually quite an interesting individual, but he was also quite hideous. He was short, he was fat, he smelled horrible. It was almost like he subsisted entirely on onions and garlic and coffee all at the same time all day. And he was pretty disgusting too. There were a lot of pustules on his face. And, well, you know, folks, my mama taught me that you don't judge people because you just don't know what life has done to them. And you gotta be nice to everybody. I've taken that to heart over the course of my extra-planar Pinkerton lifestyle, and I've decided that that is probably the best thing to do. Well, anyway, I decided to take a room from this here Mr. High-Spirited Mr. Gunther Maroon, and then I decided to start looking out the rest of the town. Turns out there really wasn't much of a town to begin with. There was supposed to be about, 200 and something people, but there really was only about 40 from what I actually saw. Maybe it had to do with the disappearances. Everybody didn't really want to talk to me either. Maybe it was because I just looked so good with my nice outfit and riding stuff and guns loaded and so on, or maybe it was just because I was an outsider. And that's a valuable lesson to teach, kids. You might be an outsider when you first come into some place, but when you leave some place, you really should be a friendly insider anytime you can. Well, anyway, I was walking around talking to people here and there. Most of the people couldn't tell me about what these disappearances were really all about other than they just went missing. And then, of course, when I asked about stolen property, they did mention that things like, cattle and things on ranches have been taken, people's foodstuffs have been absconded with, and so on. Well, I decided that this was probably a pretty sketchy idea, but it was more than likely bandits, or maybe somebody was just trying to sell off the town piece by piece. That happens sometimes. So I decided to go straight to the town hall and talk to the mayor. Turns out the mayor had been disappeared as well. The only person that was left was a very, very sweaty, frustrated man who apparently was just the town clerk. I asked him what he knew, and he said literally next to nothing. So I said, well, shit. I don't know exactly where to go here, but I decided I still need to put my best effort in. Walked around town a little bit more and talked to a few more people, and eventually I got lucky, y'all. I saw this old lady walking down the street, and I said, excuse me, ma'am, is there anything you know about town I should know? And she said, well, I will tell you one thing. I wouldn't check in at that tavern and inn. It gets kind of weird, especially at nighttime. I says, well, what do you mean by weird? Well, she says that after night, all the lights go out throughout the entire building, and Mr. Gunther Maroon makes a lot of weird noises. Now, folks, I know what you're thinking. I'm used to being in places that are dark and being around people that make weird noises. I was going to do my best here either way. What ended up happening was I thanked the old lady for her advice, and I waited across the street for until nightfall came to be, and it was a full moon outside, illuminating the entire street and the emptiness in between. People began shutting their windows and boarding up their doors and so on. Eventually, just like the old lady said, the building became quite dark. All the candles were snuffed out, and I saw Mr. Gunther Maroon walking around. Then it was quiet. I started to make my way to the saloon when I heard Mr. Gunther Maroon howling and making really weird noises. It almost was like an animal of some kind. So I decided to take advantage of that and bust in at the opportune moment. And I rushed inside, and I saw him in the back of the entire saloon. And I said, excuse me, Mr. Gunther, are you okay? I heard you screaming like the devil. Well, he said, oh, I'm fine. There's no reason to be in here. You should just probably head on up to bed, sir. I said, well, listen, I heard some strange noises. I just wanted to make sure you were okay. This town does have a weird reputation after all. He finally said, oh, no, it wasn't that. I was just summoning my Shoggoth. I was praying to the Lord. Now, folks, when a man speaks like that beforehand and they cover themselves, that usually means they got something to hide. I've learned that being a detective. So I said, Mr. Gunther, you said something about Shoggoth? That's when he tried to cover it up. He said, oh, no, I didn't say that. I said sugar. I said, I was summoning my sugar. Sugar, I do love sugar, praying to the Lord. Anyway, you have a good night, sir. And of course, he didn't even remember my name, which meant that he was very tense. So then that's when I decided to take initiative. I ran upstairs making a lot of noise, thinking that I was going to bed, y'all. But in reality, I was waiting for him to disappear so I could sneak back down. And so he did. He ran back downstairs into his cellar. That's when I snuck downstairs. I made sure my pistols were loaded. I kept my ears open, and then I headed down. It was quite creepy and damp down there, and I heard some weird noises and chanting. It had to come from Mr. Gunther. And then, of course, it just sounded weird, and everything was just moist, and oh my goodness, folks, it was disgusting. But what are you going to do? This is an entirely different environment and so forth. Plus, I also thought it was weird that for a town that's this close and this flat to the water, that he would have a cellar. But then again, I grew up in a monastery trained entirely by circus animals. So I really couldn't judge him. As I said before, you just don't judge people. Anyway, I went down there and I saw Mr. Gunther over this circle that he had drawn in the dirt with chalk. It was like a circle thing, and there was like a star inside of it that had 7 points, and then there was a book in the center of it he was reading from. Anyway, long story short, he was the one causing that noise. So that's when I took initiative. I said, Mr. Gunther, what's going on down here? And no sooner did I say that, kids, than a door that I swear was not there before in the center of this circle just popped out of existence, and it flung open. And I saw this big, disgusting creature come out of it. It was horrible. It was like this ball of tentacles and eyes and 4 or 5 different mouths on it, and it was making all kinds of bizarre noises. I fear that my mind was already beginning to crack. But that's when I realized that from my circus animal Jesuit priest father and mothers who raised me, that sometimes people come in different forms. And I said, hey there, I don't know who you are, but I'm investigating what's going on in this town. I need some answers. Well, folks, this thing did really want to talk to me. In fact, it just started shambling towards me and hobbling and making weird noises. Well, my primal instincts kicked in, and I knew this thing was trying to eat me. And of course, it was confirmed immediately because Mr. Gunther said, "Ha! Bow down before the Lord of Darkness in the water. The Shoggoth is going to devour you. I hope you're prepared." And of course I was. But I don't think he meant to say that. I think he meant to say something like, "Feel the might of the Shoggoth and taste good in its mouth." Something like, akin to being sinister and so on. But he just obviously was a kind of green in that department. Well, anyway, kids, I headed straight for the 2 guns on my hips and I pulled out my LeMat. Now, I have 2 of these, by the way, but I pulled out the first one and unloaded every bullet into it. The thing was still coming, making weird noises. I was astounded. Normally, after I shot people 9 times, well, they just fall down dead, or maybe screaming, but the point is they just don't keep shambling towards me. But that's what it was. So I flipped the little switch and pulled back the hammer and fired off the single buckshot into this thing. It let out a disgusting holler, and I just said, "Oh my goodness, this thing's still coming." So I pulled out my other LeMat, and I fired off all 9 bullets and the shell, and by that time, bang, 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 this creature was falling to pieces. It was starting to melt, almost like Jell-O. But I did notice something weird, though. It started smoking. Now, normally, folks, when you see smoke, that means you're around fire. And when you're around fire, that means it's either a campfire or that means it's an explosive. Well, I decided to be smart and pragmatic and assume it was the latter. I started running back upstairs to dive out the front door. Now, Mr. Gunther was screaming, "Wait, don't leave me here, take me with you." But unfortunately, his out-of-shape body and pustules slowed him down. But he tried his best to hobble up those stairs, and when I landed in the dirt and looked over my shoulder, the entire building began to erupt in one big explosion. And poor Mr. Gunther got caught in the debris. Well, everything collapsed in on itself, and then it started to fall down. And then it started to swirl into a circle and collapse in on itself. I suppose you could call that an implosion. I'd never seen an implosion in my life, children, and it was quite fascinating. Little did I know that implosion was going to just pop out of existence, and next thing I know, when I looked back, the building was gone, and there was a crater in the ground, quite a smooth one, too, almost like it had been crafted by an Italian artisan of some kind, just like the fancy stuff that they make for me to wear. Well, anyway, this crater had people underneath it. There was about, 50, 100 people in cages, shouting up there going, "Oh my goodness, we can see the moon. Hey, who's up there? Maybe you can help us out. We've been stuck down here. We've been abducted." Now, folks, when I hear abducted, that is a legal violation. That's when I knew I had found the missing townspeople. And then I also looked over and realized there were a number of things like crates and barrels and buckets and so on with all kinds of goodies nearby. That's when I realized I found the missing government property. Well, it looks like Mr. Gunther really was responsible for the whole thing. But it turns out that whatever kind of bizarre evil he summoned turned in on itself. But then again, sometimes you gotta have your guns filled with righteousness as much as your heart. That's what I've learned from this little tale, children. And I hope you learned something too. If you'd like to know the epilogue, it's quite simple. I ran back up to where I hitched my horse. I sent a quick telegram to my bosses in D.C. and I said, "Stop, monsters, stop, town safe, goods recovered, stop, not going to happen again, stop, like Louisiana and the food is good, stop." Well, wouldn't you know, within a few hours, I received a telegram back that said something along the lines of, "Good job, come on back and we'll do something for you next time. We've got probably a few new case files or something." And folks, it was really getting hazy at that point because this was all on the same day and I was a little tired. Well, anyway, that was my involvement in the town of Hardy Crab, Louisiana, 1892. Now tune in next time and I'll be more than happy to tell you about the time where I befriended a minotaur in Egypt, saving the famous Egyptologist from Britain as he was disappeared under the Temple of Doom. And feel free to check in next time and we'll be more than happy to spook your little hearts and tell you enthralling tales of excitement. This is Prescott, the Extra-Planar Pinkerton, signing out, and I believe we've all learned a valuable lesson. Keep your guns clean, your heart pure, and don't be a douchebag.